I am formulating, planning on raiding a couple of different sides if I had my way, and these are the players that I would nab from your club. Howdy, it's Sam. Welcome to the Wobble and Jaw Sports channel. If you're new around here, I hope I can get you to consider liking the content and subscribing to the channel. If you are a regular around these here parts, thank you very much for the continuous support. I thought with about a week to go before the NRL season kicks off proper, I'd have a look at the North Queensland Cowboys roster and see how we're shaping up for the season ahead, how we're going to shape up towards the cutoff date in June, and then eventually November 1st rolls around. Also, what I'm going to look at too are all of the clubs in the NRL. All 16 I've cast my eye over as far as who's off contract in 2023 and who I would immediately pick up from that club who is off contract in 2023. But let's start with the home side, North Queensland Cowboys. To kick things off with, let's talk about the Cowboys that are locked away for at least 2 seasons. And here's a graphic to help show you. Starting with the players that are locked away from the North Queensland Cowboys for over 2 seasons at this point in time, Griffin Neame, Jason Taumalolo, Murray Taulagi, Ruben Cotter, Scott Drinkwater, Valentine Holmes, Luciana Leilua, Reece Robson, and as recently as this past weekend, Jeremiah Nanai has re-signed until 2027. So all of those players that I've just mentioned there, they are in it for the long haul. And that is a very impressive core group of players to attract other weapons from different clubs to help boost the status, to help boost the premiership hopes of the men from Townsville. I think that is a fantastic core group of players to be surrounding yourself with and to promote that these are the players that we believe in and we want to promote in going forward. Let's talk about the small group of players now up at the Cowboys who are free to negotiate. They are on contract for 2024 or have a player option in their favor. But let me show you who is free to negotiate from now for November 1st. Starting with co-captain Chad Townsend, Cohen Hess, Hylam Lukey, Tom Dearden, Thomas Chester, and club legend Kyle Felt. The main priority, I think, from now until November 1st, basically, is to try and figure out how to keep Tom Dearden, who is free to negotiate from November 1st. That is a gentleman that has only improved since he's moved up to Townsville and left the Brisbane Broncos, and he's only going to get better. He's only going to get better as well. Tom Dearden from that group of players that I've just shown, that is the priority from now on. We were lucky to get Jeremiah Nanai. Not entirely sure on what the deal was for him. Reportedly 900 grand. Oh man, that would be a little bit intense, wouldn't it? But Tom Dearden is someone that you might have to pay 800 grand for come November 1st. He is a terrific player. He proved himself in the State of Origin arena, took us to a preliminary final in 2022. That is the player that we need to lock up come November 1st, because there are going to be half a dozen clubs that are going to be fishing around for Tom Dearden's signature. Of all the clubs in the National Rugby League at this point, the North Queensland Cowboys have more players off contract at season's end more than any other team. They have got a lot of figuring out, a lot of roster management to work on with 15 players. If you include Jeremiah Nanai, up until last week, we had 16 players that were off contract by the end of 2023. The nearest to us is the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs with 13. And then basically on an average, you're looking at about 8 players off contract for every other NRL club but for 2023. So the Cowboys have got a lot of signing to do. They're probably going to be the most in your face when it comes to signings. Let me tell you who the players are that are off contract this season. Ben Hampton, Jack Gajewski, Jermaine Tanua-Brown, Peter Hiku, Riley Price, Brendan Elliott, Jake Burke, James Jordan McLean, Mitch Dunn, Guillemot Shibasaki, Jake Granville, Taniela Seidrugu, Jordan Lip, and Mose Drake. Of all those players that I just mentioned, and looking at it right now, I'll tell you what, this Taniela Seidrugu, it's looking like he may not even get a crack this year in first grade because they're shifting Cohen Hess to an edge. James Tarmo is going to just rightfully take his place as a veteran of 300 plus games in the side. Jack Gajewski got the nod over Seidrugu in last weekend's trial game against the Brisbane Broncos. So I don't know, man, but I would love to see Taniela Seidrugu remain a North Queensland Cowboy. And also along to add to that, another player that's literally just popped into my head then is Sylvester Namo. Sylvester Namo, the Papua New Guinea and Kumul. I would really love to keep that bloke. Jake Granville, the probably the most high profile name in all of that. Granville, I'd like to keep as well. I don't know if he will or not. I had doubts about him even cracking the 17 this season, but it seems like he's going to, and I'm all for it. There is another name in there that must be mentioned about Peter Hiku. He was signed for 2 seasons. He was one of the top 5 centers in 2022. He was outstanding, out of this world, bro. And with all due respect, and this isn't me opening up the door for him, trying to lead him the way out, just in my opinion and the vibe that I've got, Peter Hiku, I don't know if he's going to sign on to have another year in Townsville. I don't know. He's younger than me, which is crazy. Peter Hiku, I don't know if he's going to... I think he will continue playing first grade. There's no doubt about that. He showed last season that he's got plenty more left in the tank. But I don't know. I don't know if he's going to remain a Cowboy post 2023. Would I like to sign him up? Absolutely. But he is one of those players in this 1 to 17. I don't know. Maybe the Cowboys and I need to start thinking about who's going to take this spot if he is off contract in 2023 and possibly may want to leave. Who are we going to have to fill that void? And that is where the next section of this video comes in. I have looked amongst all of your clubs, and the players that are off contract this year that I think would be most suitable for the North Queensland Cowboys moving forward into 2024 and beyond, these are the players that I've come up with. There are a few clubs where there are a few players that that are off contract. Like, let's look at the Cronulla Sutherland Sharks first off. Firstly, you have Jaden Beryl, who was Queensland Cup Hooker of the Year a couple of seasons ago. If you haven't seen what he can do, go see highlights, go read up his stats. Jaden Beryl is a first grader that hasn't truly been given a proper crack yet at first grade. And he's got Blake Brayley in front of him as well, man. So maybe Beryl might find himself a first grade position this year, but he's off contract at the end of the year. And could you imagine if Jaden Beryl came up and he was jersey number 14 for us, coming off the bench to give Reece Robson a 15-minute spell, every single week. Beryl and Robson hooker combination should be fantastic if that was to happen. The other two players that are off contract at Cronulla Sharks that I think would be suitable, that could actually work out. You've got Jesse Ramian, who's off contract. I know that he has shown absolutely no desire to move from the Shire. However, he is off contract. In my world, in a perfect world, if I had a rainbow hit me up the backside, I'd pick him up and I'd plop him in to a Cowboys jersey, because Jesse Ramian had his best season in a number of seasons last year. He was pretty bloody good for the Cronulla Sharks, kind of underrated as well. And the other player for the Cronulla Sharks, finally, is a gentleman that I've earmarked to break out in this Cronulla Sharks outfit on BKR Sports Video a couple of weeks ago, and that is Teague Wilton. And I'll tell you what, after what we saw him do in that trial game against the Bulldogs, albeit it was just a trial, Teague Wilton, bro, looks like he is on that upward trajectory. And while the Cowboys are good for second rowers, it wouldn't hurt to have someone like Teague Wilton in the side, in my opinion. The next club I'm going to look at are the West Tigers. There's only one name that pops out to me that I think could be a suitable purchase, and that would be Alex Seyfarth. I think over the past 2 seasons, he has shown some really nice promise. At times, he's even arguably been the best player for them on the paddock on a certain game, or for a certain game. And I think under Todd Payton and Dean Young, if Dean Young chooses to stay around, I think Alex Seyfarth could actually evolve his game quite nicely and be a pretty bloody good weapon for us if we were to pinch someone like Alex Seyfarth, whose contract is up by the end of 2023. So I look at that Tigers side, who would be a most suitable replacement or a good purchase. I understand that a player like Luke Brooks is off contract at 2023. Well, he wouldn't be a suitable purchase now, would he? I think Alex Seyfarth would be a pretty decent purchase, and I think would actually flourish under Todd Payton from 2024 onwards. From the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, I think the Cowboys are needing a big forward. Yeah, we've got McLean and James Tarmo. We've also got Griffin Neame, who is a young bull who looks like he's going to be a starting front rower from 2024 onwards if Jordan McLean chooses not to sign on. But I look at the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, and there is just only the one name that sticks out to me who would be suitable for the Cowboys. That's Luke Thompson. Luke Thompson has had a real bugger of a start to his NRL career, but over the past 18 months or so, he has definitely found his feet, and I have started to see what all that hype was about. So I would purchase Luke Thompson from the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs to come up to Townsville from 2024, and just to be a leader amongst men, to be an enforcer, and to be a bulldozing forward that I think the Cowboys need to specifically focus on moving forward. Looking at the Brisbane Broncos now, there are 3 players that stick out to me. The first one is Thomas Flegler. Thomas Flegler can give away a few penalties and have his ass sin binned twice in one game. But Thomas Flegler played Origin for a reason, bro. He can be a really good forward, and he's off contract at the end of 2023. And I think the Cowboys do need another big prop, and Flegler definitely fits that bill. Another player, Keenan Palacia, Samoan international as well. I think Keenan Palacia could be a good fit for the Cowboys if he chooses to commit himself to the front row under Todd Payton. And the last player for the Broncos is one of the players that I'm going to highlight big time. If Peta Hiku decides not to re-sign for the North Queensland Cowboys, I am looking straight at you, Jesse Arthurs. Jesse Arthurs is supremely underappreciated, underrated in my opinion. He plays on the same edge as Peta Hiku. Jesse Arthurs and Kyle Felt in 2024 potentially would go gangbusters in my opinion. Jesse Arthurs is a talent that I would pick up in a heartbeat. I am fair dinkum when I say this. He is one of the players I hope the Cowboys have a fair dinkum good think about for 2024 because Arthurs is not going to play consistent first grade at the Brisbane Broncos with the likes of Herbie Farnworth and Tony Staggs in the centres. He showed what he can do at the Warriors. He is showing what he is doing or has done at the Brisbane Broncos. And for a fair income opportunity at playing full-time rugby league in his favourite position as centre, I think if Peta Hiku decides to leave, the synergy is bloody beautiful for Jesse Arthurs to come up in 2024. Looking at the green machine now, the Canberra Raiders. Could you imagine a world where Reece Robson plays about 50 odd minutes, tackles his dick off, makes about 40 tackles in about 50 minutes, and then you've got Tom Starling that comes on and is an absolute menace. A Robson-Tom Starling 9 and 14 combination would be electric. It would be fearsome, in my opinion. And with Tom Starling to be under the guidance of Todd Payten's coaching, holy dooly, that would be amazing. Tom Starling is off contract at the end of 2023. And while I think there is a player option in his favour, if the Cowboys were thinking about not having Tom Chester as jersey number 14 as a utility, I think you pick up Tom Starling and have him continue to be that utility hooker coming off the bench to be just an absolute flash off of the bench. So for the Canberra Raiders, I'm going to choose Tom Starling to come up in 2024. This one's a bit more of a tricky one. The Moreton Bay Dolphins or the Redcliffe Dolphins. A lot of them have signed on for 2 or 3 years. There is one player though whose contract is up by the end of 2023, and this player has actually stood out a fair bit in these trials. Poasa Fa'amausili from the Redcliffe Dolphins looks like an absolute goer, and that is the gentleman that I think could fill up a bench spot and play front row. I know he does look a little bit smaller, so maybe he would have to play second row or even float around for Jason Taumalolo when he does come off for a rest. But Fa'amausili from the Dolphins, Poasa Fa'amausili, I believe that's how you pronounce it. Apologies if I've got that wrong. That would be the Dolphin that I would pick up to bring up to the Cowboys in 2024. It's the same story with the Melbourne Storm as well. There's not a lot of players that are off contract or could be suitable for a move up to Townsville. So I'm looking at Tepai Moroa, the Super Rugby convert to rugby league, and he has played for the Melbourne Storm for a couple of seasons now. He does have that experience behind him, and if James Tarmo and if Jordan McLean do not re-sign with the North Queensland Cowboys, that is my biggest fear, to be honest with you, that we're not going to have a well-experienced smash-up forward that's going to help out the younger fella like Griffin Neame, for example. I think the forward pack, the depth, while the initial starting 1 to 17 forward pack for the Cowboys is fantastic, I think the depth is just, I'm not overly convinced on the depth, unfortunately. So I would go Tepai Moroa that I would cherry pick from the Melbourne Storm and plop him up in Townsville. From the Newcastle Knights, again, it's the same story. There's only a handful of players that are off contract at the end of 2023, but Brodie Jones is off contract. And if we had him for a depth signing, that I think he could get some minutes in 2024. I like Brodie Jones a lot. If you recall his game against the Cronulla Sharks in round 6 of 2021, he absolutely stole the show for a bloke that was on friggin' debut or playing only his second ever game of first grade. He was absolutely amazing, and I do think that he's got the wrong coach at the moment, and a fresh start under a better coach, a more proven coach in Todd Payten. I think Brodie Jones would be sick up at North Queensland. Looking at the Parramatta Eels now, and I'm looking at one man that could fill a void if Peta Hiku does decide to leave at the end of 2023, and that is Wonga Blake. And I understand that Wonga Blake, he has some issues under the high ball, but his man of the match performances cannot be denied. He can be an absolute game breaker. He can open up the game for you. And I really do like Wonga Blake, and maybe under Todd Payton, he gets rid of 80% of those errors. So I think he would go really well under Todd Payton. I think Wonga Blake could fill the gap that Petahiku could leave if he decides to jet off for other pastures as well. So from Parramatta, I would choose Wonga Blake. From the Manly Warringah Sea Eagles, there are two players. There are two players that that could fill the needs of the Cowboys in 2024, depending on if players decide to leave. One of those players, Brad Parker, is off contract at 2023, and I think he does play on Petahiku's edge anyway. I would have Brad Parker and Kyle Felt as a combination in a heartbeat. I think while defensively it could be try time deluxe for the other team, I think attackingly though, I think Brad Parker would be really cool to have, and he is off contract in 2023. And the other player, I'd bring up Ethan Bullimore. Bullimore is off contract in 2023, and I don't know, it's just, I don't feel like it's working at Manly, but then again, we've got an entire year to see how he goes this season. He is a Queenslander. He did represent the Broncos. He still, in my opinion, played his best footy when he was at Red Hill. But I think Ethan Bullimore, you bring him up to Queensland, you pop him under Todd Payton's guidance, and I think he could be an all right prop. I think he could go more than all right under Todd Payton as a bulldozing prop. So I'd go Ethan Bullimore and Brad Parker from Manly. From the Sydney Roosters now, they are close or in the top 5 of having the most players off contract in 2023. And to be honest with you, there's not a whole lot of range there for the Cowboys to utilise. But for me, I would go Egan Butcher. Egan Butcher's just been really consistent for about 2 or 3 seasons now. And I think he would fill the gap really, really nicely. I think he'd be really good for us from 2024 onwards. Now, shifting over to the next side, and that's the New Zealand Warriors. And again, it is all a little bit reliant on whether or not Petahiku does re-sign. And this isn't me, putting too much pressure on Hiku or pushing him out the door or whatever. I'm just looking at who's off contract, and Petahiku's off contract this year, and he was absolutely outstanding. And if he is going to leave, that void needs to be filled. So I would probably go, if I had to choose somebody from the New Zealand Warriors, I'd say Marcelo Montoya. Even though his go is at winger, he can play centre as well. And I think Montoya would be a really good fit for the North Queensland Cowboys if Hiku did leave. Looking at the South Sydney Rabbitohs, and there are 2 players that will fill the 2 voids that I think need most addressing over the next 6 to 8 months. Number 1, Jed Cartwright. Jed Cartwright is a young fella that every time I've seen him play, he has done some really solid things, and I would see him at centre from 2024. Also, Hame Saleh is off contract in 2023. He has shown a lot of good signs as well, and I'd have him coming off the bench in 2024 to be a bulldozing forward. So those are the 2 players from South Sydney that I would cherry pick out of the club and up north. From the Gold Coast Titans, there are 2 options here for me that stick out. One of them being Sam McIntyre, who I think has been one of the most underrated, improved players in the NRL over the past 2 seasons or so. I've actually liked what he has done for the Gold Coast over the past little while, and I think with him being off contract in 2023, he would come up predominantly to play front row, even though he's a bit of a smaller body. And if injuries, touch wood, ever did occur, Sam McIntyre has proven that he's actually not too bad at filling that void. So Sam McIntyre would be one of them. And then the other gentleman is a bloke that we got a fair income taste of just this past weekend in a game against the Redcliffe Dolphins. Aloafia Khan Pereira is off contract at the end of this season. He scored 4 tries. He scored about 25 in 19 games, Queensland Cup games last season. This dude is an effing superstar, bro. And I know that Felt and I know that Murray Taulagi are already there, and Khan Pereira would have to play wing. But I'll tell you what, you would sign him up though, wouldn't you, as a bit of a depth signing? So, and just to be cheeky as well, just quietly. So, Sam McIntyre and Khan Pereira would be those two players who are off contract this year that I would select from the Gold Coast Titans to come up to the Cowboys in 2024. And then finally, we get to the main event. We get to the team that has a factory of talent just coming through at will. The Penrith Panthers, the back-to-back champions, and looking like they might be again for a third time this season. Penrith Panthers, who are the players who are off contract that I would look at to potentially come up to North Queensland? There are three. There are indeed three. One of them being Eddie Blacker, who is a young gentleman who I do believe he has played first grade just a handful of times. I do think so. If not, correct me if I'm wrong. But every time I've seen him play in New South Wales Cup or I've seen him play in first grade, he has always raised my eyebrows, bro. I really like Eddie Blacker, bro, a lot. I really like the bloke. The other two players are massive. They're going to be hot property, and I don't know. I don't know if they're both going to stay or if just one of them is going to stay. The first one seemingly is halfway out the door. Spencer Leniu. This guy gets fired out of a cannon every time he hits the ball up. He's absolutely outstanding, and I would sign him up in an absolute heartbeat. Spencer Leniu in a North Queensland Cowboys jersey. Oh, and finally, Scott Sorensen. I know the Cowboys are good for back row depth, but it wouldn't freaking hurt having Scott Sorensen come off the bench in 2024 in Cowboys colours. How hot would Sorensen look in a Cowboys jersey? Holy dooly. So those are the three players from Penrith that I would look at to pinch in 2024. But ultimately, it's all in the hands of Todd Payten. Those are the players that I would pick from your club. But just to mention, now that I'm really thinking about it, I'm looking at Jordan Limp. He's another player that has a lot of potential. Has not made his first grade debut yet, but could if Pete Hiku decides to leave. And I think that's going to be a smooth transition. And that's sort of the great thing about North Queensland over the past 12 months or so is that the depth that we've got in certain positions is very, very good. Jordan Lip is a very good centre. So I would probably look at Jordan Lip, Taniela Seidrugu, Sylvester Nemo, and Jake Granville to re-sign as an urgent re-signing. The rest of the players that are off contract this season, I hope they all stay about. I honestly do. I wouldn't want to kick anybody out the door if they didn't deserve it. But it's roster management, and there needs to be hard calls made. So I look at players like James Tarmo. He's not going to be around in 2024. Potentially, there's a high chance, with all due respect, but potentially he could be at the door as well. So it's going to be interesting because the Cowboys, it looks like that they're going to be in the news a fair bit, maybe more than any other side this year, as so far as re-signing or brand new signings for 2024 onwards. What's your opinion on all that I've just spoken about? Please leave your comments down below. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you. Adios.